Alli, that was the dumbest thing you've ever said. Do you have rocks for brains?
Wow, Shawna, that's harsh.
That doesn't make me feel very good to say that. And I'm sure it didn't make you feel good. Tell us about our guest today.
So our guest is going to help us with things like contempt or things where we disagree with family members or coworkers or people on social media. Our guest is Miss Tami Pyfer, and she is from the Dignity Index, and she's going to teach us how to get along better, and it's going to help our mental health.
Let's dive in.
And wait, before we do that, let me give a shout out to a Girls Talk Healthy Aging listener, Miss Jill French. Thanks so much for listening and for your support. Welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, where we dive deep into pressing health and fitness issues facing aging women. I'm Alli Kerr.
And I'm Shawna Kaminski. And together we'll bring candid conversations, expert advice, and personal stories that will inspire and empower you on your own wellness journey.
Today is such a different topic for us, and it may seem weird that we're talking about this, but actually it is so fitting that we've got our guest, Miss Tami Pyfer, on today, and she is from the Dignity Index, and I can't wait to hear how she is going to help us have better discourse with our friends, our family, when it comes to difficult topics, especially things even like politics. So welcome, Tami, to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be with you today.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Dignity Index, which a lot of people have never heard of. And just to give people an idea of what we're talking about today, the first question when you go to the website is, if you could ease the divisions in America, would you do it? And Shawna's from Canada. She's from a different country, and we have listeners from different countries. So even maybe we can change that to, if you could help ease divisions in the world, would you do it? But for your purposes, I know your focus is here in America. So we want to start out by hearing a background of Tami, who you are, and how you got involved in this wild project that you're doing, Tami. So tell us a little bit about your history and how you came to this place.
Well, thank you again for having me. I am a mom. I've got 5 married children, 15 grandchildren, and one on the way, and started my career as a teacher, and moved into higher education, taught at Utah State University, and then was in politics. I was an elected city council person in my community in northern Utah for 8 years, was then on the state school board, and got a call one day from our governor asking if I would be his education policy advisor. So our previous governor, for the last 7 years of his term, I was his education policy advisor, all of which, by the way, other than the first thing that I chose, which was being a teacher, everything that followed that was unexpected. They are things that I didn't have a map. I didn't say, it's 4 years now, I'm going to do this, and here's the next step in my career. They were opportunities that just happened to come to me, that I was excited about and prepared to accept. And so it's been a really interesting and wild and beautiful ride as far as a career. Toward the end of my time with my governor, I was, again, worked for him for 7 years. The last year I worked with him was 2020, and COVID hit. And as we all know, there were quite a few divisive moments during COVID, especially as it related to education. Schools shut down. We went virtual. You may remember, at least here in the United States, teachers were heroes for the first couple of months. We went virtual, and the teachers were doing the heavy lifting, and they went online. They did instruction. People were having little parades here in Utah for teachers. And it was really heartwarming, actually. People were coming together, and it didn't take long for that to stop. And, by midsummer, fall, when we were getting ready to start school again, the mask mandates or mask requirements in certain schools hit. And all of a sudden, teachers who were the heroes in the spring were the villains in the fall. And, saying, I'm worried about people coming to school. I'm worried I have health problems. I have a sick, parent that I care for at home. People have to wear masks, or I may get ill, or I may bring COVID home. And just the battles just throughout that year really intensified. And it was the last year of my governor's term. And so it was my last year with him. And I just remember waking up every morning going, I don't think I can go in and read another nasty email today. I don't think I can read, people and friends, people I know in the community emailing me and the governor saying, how dare you do XYZ? And so I was very, very discouraged. During that time, I had met Tim Shriver, who is the chair of Special Olympics. He had come to Utah in 2019, the year before, and had talked a lot about his ideas for changing the dialogue in the country. And he wasn't calling it dignity index or anything like that at the time, but he just said we should be applying these lessons that we teach students, these lessons of problem solving, of perspective taking, empathy, working with diverse groups of students. They're in the field of social emotional learning, which Tim helped pioneer. And he said, let's apply those lessons to politics. And I remember just like having this experience where all of a sudden, my heart was on fire. And it's like, okay, that's the answer. That's what we should be doing. Let's apply these lessons to politics. And so during 2020, as things started to shut down and I had kept up some communication with Tim, he had come to Utah a couple of times speaking to education groups. And he said, you should volunteer with my group. We're getting together. We're forming this organization. We want to change the dialogue. We want to change the country. And so I started volunteering a little bit in 2020 as things shut down. And then when my governor's term expired, then I joined his organization called Unite. And we began to refine these ideas that he had been talking about for a couple of years. And there was a small group of us working on those ideas. You're getting the long version, I'm sorry. But then everything just sort of pulled together then in 2021. And we said, what would we do? What is our work to do? There's literally hundreds of groups in what we call the bridge building space, the depolarization space, the democracy reform, hundreds of groups trying to solve this problem that we are all facing, and not just in the United States, but throughout the world. And we felt that our work to do was to change the dialogue and to change the conversations and reactions we were having to each other from one of contempt to one of dignity. We had read a book by Arthur Brooks called Love Your Enemies, and he talks about how the problems we have aren't immigration, they're not tax reform, they're not guns. I mean, those are all problems. The problem we have is that we can't solve those problems because of the contempt that we have for people who think differently. If I'm pro-gun control and you're anti-gun control, the problem isn't that difference. The problem is I hate you because of it. And I hold you in contempt, and you're ruining the country. So we took that premise about contempt really being the problem we should solve. And on the other side of contempt, there's dignity. We read the work of Dr. Donna Hicks, who's an international conflict resolution specialist. She traveled the world, for 25 plus years, solving intractable problems, working with people sitting across the table from each other who were literally killing each other's groups. And she wrote a beautiful book called Dignity and a follow-up called Leading with Dignity. And she points to dignity and offering people dignity, the key to turning these conversations around and the key to solving these problems. And so we built upon both the work of Dr. Brooks and Dr. Hicks. And the more we looked into dignity, the more we realized that's the key. That's the way to, our tagline says, we want to ease divisions, we want to prevent violence, and we want to solve problems. And we started with a focus on the country, on politics. But what we've really discovered is that dignity is the key to solving problems and easing divisions in our families, in our workplace, in our communities, in our religious organizations. Anytime you have a relationship, if you can start to apply these principles of dignity, you'll see things start to turn around. So that's the long version of how I got to where I am right now.
That's amazing. And I like that when you're speaking more globally in terms of bringing dignity to these difficult political situations, but it's much more than that. It starts with interpersonal, because if we can learn skills to get along with our families, our neighbors, then we can extend them to other conversations. So tell us, what are some of the tips? How can we get along with each other more respectfully?
So the Dignity Index, it's a scale that measures some of the things that we say. And we think that the first step is to start to look at that language that we use and be able to identify language that we often use just, out of a matter of habit, but that we don't realize that the words we use are words of contempt. So we developed this scale, and you'll see this on our website. It's a scale from 1 to 8. And what we did is we looked at the phrases that we use that signify contempt or signify dignity. One of the most common things that I've experienced that I'm a work in progress, depending on the news of the day or what's happening situationally. When you wake up and say, "Oh my gosh, those people are ruining the country," those people. If you're a Republican, I'm a Republican, the tendency is to say, "Man, those Democrats are ruining everything." If you're a Democrat, it's the opposite, right? So when you start to say those people, even that phrase, those people, and then if you say they're the reason that we have problems, they're the reason we can't get anything solved, you are on the contempt side of the scale. And you may not realize that. You may not realize that starting to place that blame puts you in this language of contempt. We have these definitions, very short definitions, which is contempt means I see myself above you. I am better than you. And when I start talking about those people, I am talking about people who are not as good as I am. I am better than those people. Dignity is when you see yourself not better than someone else, but you see yourself in someone else. And it's like, once you see yourself in someone else, you start to get curious about that person. Why do they think that? And you might say, why on earth do they think that, right?
Yeah.
But that's the first step to being curious about it in the first place and say, I wonder why they think that. I wonder why they think this policy is going to solve the problems that we're having right now. If you could even start to say, look, everyone has a right to be here. Everyone has a right to be heard. I'm not better than anyone else. I'm not inferior to anyone else. I actually see myself in other people. That's the first step then on the dignity side of the scale. Everyone has a right to be here. And then if you can start asking questions, why do you think that? Tell me something about your background and your experience. You've learned a little bit about my background. You've learned that I've had, experience serving in public office. That changes my perspective. So when certain things come up and I'm quick to say, wait a second, I think there might be another perspective on this. It's because I've had that experience that other people maybe haven't had. And there's a world full of people who have had experiences that I have not had. So it takes curiosity, it takes humility to say that someone else might see this another way. Let me find out about that. So we feel like the first step is, again, looking at the scale and looking at some of the language. When you move up the dignity side of the scale, a 5 is just saying, look, everyone has a right to be here. 6 is when you say, let's find those things we have in common. And let's build on those things we have in common. You'll see good elected officials do this on a regular basis. Let's see what we have in common. Let's write some policy or let's solve problems that way. A 7 is when I start to say, I want to find out what we don't have in common. I know we disagree on this. Now I want to talk about it. And a lot of times in families, in your work setting, you don't want to talk about the stuff you disagree on. It's like, let's just set that aside. We'll never agree. This is too risky for me. But at the level of a 7 on our 1 to 8 scale, a 7 is when you're saying, I actually do want to find out why you came to that conclusion. I want to talk about what we disagree on. And a 7 means I am willing to say, I could be wrong about that. I think I made a mistake there. I think that what I did on this particular vote on my city council or my state school board or as your representative, I think I was wrong. Let's go back and talk about that. You don't see that happening very often in political leaders. It's hard for us as human beings, really, once we're entrenched in a position and we've taken a lot of heat and we've dug in to go back and say, I could have been wrong about that. But when you're able to admit that you're wrong publicly, that is showing people dignity. I hold you in such high regard that I'm just going to admit I could have gotten that wrong. And then when you get to the level eight, the language on our scale is that we think that each one of us is born with inherent dignity. By the mere fact that we're human beings sharing the planet, we deserve to be treated with this basic level of dignity. And so 8 says that we're born with inherent worth. We treat everyone with dignity no matter what. That doesn't mean I necessarily have to agree with you. I don't have to like you. I don't have to take your side on an issue. But I believe that I see a little bit of myself in you, and I need to treat you with dignity. So think about back to what are some of those things that we could do, Shawna, that you asked that could lead us maybe into better conversations. First of all, recognizing, these levels of the scale, some of the language that can lead us into contempt, some of the language of dignity, and then start to practice that. Start to pause. On the back of our card, we have some little skill building exercises or suggestions. And the first one is to be curious. Be curious. Ask questions. Pull yourself back and say, I wonder why they think that. Another one is we listen to hear people, not to respond. Again, I'm a work in progress. People think we work for the Dignity Index, so we do this all the time, and I'm really good at it. Some days I'm really good at it. Other days it's like, wow, start over, Tami. And listen to respond. A lot of times we listen so that we can formulate. That listening gives us time to formulate our answer, our rebuttal to the debate, and we are not listening to what someone is actually saying to us. We're just listening to respond. So taking a step back and just turning off the response and not even responding, say, I'm going to spend the next half hour. I actually just want to listen to everything you have to say. It's really hard. I don't think we're hardwired for that. We ask people to challenge ideas and not attack people. People will say when they start reading about the index, it's like, you just want me to give in to the other side. You just want us to get along, sing kumbaya, and let the problems fester or lose, my side lose. That's not at all what we're asking. Mm-hmm. We want people to have a more effective way of making your case. Let's say the three of us disagree on an issue. I'm trying to convince you to my side. If I call you stupid, you idiots, you're ruining the country, my way is the right way, how likely are you to see things my way? How likely are you to want to even join the conversation? You're not. But that's what we tend to do, whether it's politics or other, situations we find ourselves in. We think that attacking someone or just speaking louder and more vehemently about our case, that we're going to win people over. It doesn't work. So it's really this practical strategy of listening. I want to understand. I'm going to challenge your ideas, but I'm not going to attack you. So those are some of the first, just some of the first steps that we ask people to take, or some skills that we ask people to start to elevate maybe in their conversations.
And Tami, with you as a mom, and you have 5 children, why is this important? And in that scenario, in just the relationships that we live in, can we use this in those relationships?
So a lot of people have heard a little bit about my story during 2016. Actually, during the election of 2016, things got really heated in that presidential election, and things started to build. All of a sudden, people's political identity took preference, or people, that's how you were identified. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're this, you're that. And it was like, all of a sudden, that's how we saw people. And in my family, I have 5 adult children, and these are their political parties. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm moderate. My husband's a lifelong Republican, quite a bit more conservative than I am. I have a child who is a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. I have a Democratic Socialist, and I have a Libertarian. Those are the 5 political parties that my children identify with. And, I consider that a parenting win to some regards. Your children find themselves, they grow up. I remember, when they were really active in politics and voting, and a couple of my kids voted for President Obama. I didn't vote for President Obama, and they got so excited and enthused in that election when Bernie Sanders was campaigning. Again, the opposite side of the political aisle, but I watched, a couple of my kids just listen, and his messages resonated so strongly with them. And I would kind of shake my head and say, you do you. I'm glad you're involved. That's what I want. I want you to be involved, even though I disagreed. That used to be fine. 2016, 17, 18, that all of a sudden that's not fine anymore, right? Across the country. And I would meet with other, women's groups in particular, and women would come up to me in hushed tones and say, I have a child that's a Democrat too, as though they were an axe murderer or something, right? And so what used to be exciting and your children finding their way, all of a sudden now our family is full of political differences, and with the country and the world defining us by our political differences, we had some really difficult conversations. We had very short family gatherings, and sometimes people would decide just not to come because we couldn't have those conversations. And so this became, an issue that was I felt like was hurting my family. And I'm not pointing fingers. It wasn't my kids or my husband that were the problem. A lot of it was me. I was the problem. Telling my kids, well, you really should be doing this. How come you're not doing that? How come you're not vaccinated? How come you don't think that your kids should wear masks to school? And we were getting the back and forth, and so we just stopped talking about things. We stopped kind of gathering. COVID didn't help in that regard, but it's not just my family. This is happening in families across the country and families across the world. We're letting these politics, these differences come in because we hear it every day, and they're defining us, and it's not good for our families. And so I am particularly drawn to this work because of that. And when I left the governor's office, it was like, look, I'm all in. You tell me what I need to do to solve this problem, and I'm all in.
And how did that affect your health and families? How do you think that's when we have all that division within our families? Because, of course, we're Girls Talk Healthy Aging, and we want to help people be healthier and happier.
Well, imagine, having these issues with your kids where you're not speaking to each other. With one of my sons, I remember, and it's embarrassing for me to admit it, but I remember just really pushing him hard on vaccination, and I wouldn't let it go. And I'm typically not super pushy. I don't feel like I am anyway as a parent. I guess none of us do, but I just felt so strongly about this. I worried so much about him that I really pushed, and he just one day said, "Look, I'm going to get vaccinated, and don't talk to me about this again." And we actually didn't speak for several months. I had gone too far, and I was miserable. It's talk about mental health issues, right? When we can't speak to our family, when we're arguing, when we have these ill feelings towards our neighbors or people in our congregation on Sundays, it definitely affects our mental health. And as you look at the mental health crisis, hating other people is just not good for our health. There's really significant health implications when we carry feelings of animosity and contempt towards other people. It is not good for us. It's not good for us individually. It's not good for our families. It's certainly not good for our health.
Has the Dignity Index, applying the principles of that, has that helped you within your own family to renew those relationships, feel more connected?
Yeah, we're at a good place, and I don't mean to overstate some of the difficulties during 2020 and 2021. It was pretty tough for a lot of families. The interesting thing and the magical thing I will say about the Dignity Index is we designed it to score other people. We designed it to score political speech. And within a few weeks into our pilot, our demonstration pilot, you learn that you want to score other people, but what you're really doing is you're scoring yourself. when I would start to say, wow, I can't believe they're saying that. And then I would, on the way home, start thinking all these things like, wow, I can't believe I'm saying that. And the number one effect that we have found over and over and over that we had hoped for, but we were surprised at how strong this reaction was, is an effect we call the mirror effect. We want to judge others, but the minute we start internalizing the language on the scale is the minute we start to realize that that's us, that we're the ones talking like that we're the ones labeling other people. And so when you turn that on yourself and you start to speak in a different way, all of a sudden, all these other opportunities open up for you to solve problems, for you to ease divisions in your family, in your neighborhood, in your workplace. And it's liberating. It is really, instead of being depressed because there's nothing you can do about all the problems in the country, all of a sudden there's this, we call this the agency effect. It's like, wow, I just realized I'm part of the problem and I can be part of the solution. And it's freeing, it's liberating. And that's been one of the big effects that we found with the Dignity Index.
And with social media now, that can be such a challenging place where there's a lot of contempt and there's, and what you're saying definitely, I think, affects health. Like if we're speaking these things with language or on social media, that can affect our how we feel. I'm not going to feel happy and healthy if I'm angry and hopeless and depressed. So how do you tie this in with social media? Have y'all looked at how to help with just all the contempt that we see? Because we spend a lot of time on social media.
Yep. Yeah. And with social media, it's interesting. There was an article in Politico magazine last January, and had been following our demonstration project. And so they did a really long piece about the Dignity Index. And I was in the article talking about some of my work. And when that hit nationally, we started to get a flood of comments from people, and some people had started posting on social media. And one of the first posts that I saw after that article hit was a woman who said, I just emailed an organization whose mission I support, but I told them that I don't like the way they use contempt to raise money. And I told them that I would no longer support their organization if they continue to use that language about people they disagree with. And it was like, oh my gosh, like what if 1,000 people in one community, right, saw the contempt with whether it was a candidate, political candidate, or some other organization that raised funds? What if they all emailed that person or emailed that senator or that representative and said, you know what? I voted for you last time. I'm not voting for you again. I don't like the way you use contempt. And what if those 1,000 people turned into 10,000 people who are starting now to unsubscribe from mailing lists, from stop following people, and make sure you let them know. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to follow you anymore. This is making me sick. It's making our country ill, and nobody's got time for that. So unless you want to change the way you speak about other people, I'm out. So like social media, think of all the people that would change the way they behave on social media if they knew they weren't going to get followers and likes and clicks anymore.
Yeah.
We have this kind of overarching goal we talk about. We want to make contempt backfire. Right now, contempt wins elections. Contempt gets followers. Contempt gets clicks and likes. And, we talk about clickbait, right? You have some horrible headline, click. What if that didn't work anymore? What if contempt lost elections? What if it lost you followers? What if dignity instead, treating people with respect, having hard conversations? Again, I can't overemphasize, we don't want to live in some la-la land where we don't talk about problems. But what if I talked about it in a way where I didn't say, Allison, you're so awful. My gosh, you're ruining the country. What if I didn't say that, but say, Allison, I think completely differently than you do. Will you tell me why you think that way? And let me try and figure out some way that we can work across differences. What if people tuned into that and say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see what they have to say about that? What if that was the winning formula? And with everyone on social media, we think we can make it a winning formula. Let's just stop paying attention to contempt.
Yeah. And I think the whole idea with social media is that a lot of people are just reactionary, and behind a laptop or their phone, they're a little bit anonymous, and then they're just responding so quickly without really thinking through that this is contemptive in their responses. So if everyone just took a step back, so it's really about creating awareness about how we can treat each other with dignity.
Shawna, to that point, if people understood that there are systems and organizations and structures that are making millions and hundreds of millions of dollars off of getting us to hate each other.
Yeah.
If we woke up one day and realized that we were pawns, that you were ruining my family and you're a multimillionaire, that people are making money off of getting us to hate each other. If we all just woke up one day and realized that and said, yeah, not me, I'm out.
Yeah.
We could really change the world.
I look at it with Shawna and I work in the health and fitness space, and just like with nutrition and what we put into our bodies and the food that we put in and how that nourishes us, or how it can make us sick and how it can make us ill. This is the same thing I think about with, what the emails we're opening and the things that we're following or the things we're clicking on or the things that we're, taking in from social media or from other sources. That is, it's like it's like the nutrition that feeds our body. This is like the nutrition that feeds our mind and our mindset. And so that's why I wanted to have this conversation with on the Girls Talk Healthy Aging, because I do see this even in my work as a trainer. I see how this affects people on the mental health side, marriages, stress with relationships. And so yes, if there's some way we can help people, and we thank you all for creating this tool and sharing it with us. How can people learn more? How can people get more involved if they're interested in what you're talking about in the Dignity Index? Where do they go?
So if they're interested, just visit our website. It's dignityindex.us or dignityindex.us. And you can log on. You can find the scale on there. We've got a lot of videos. The videos are great because you get to hear all these different perspectives and different interviews that my colleague Tim Shriver has been on, some that I've been on. Anyway, you start to kind of surround yourself now, instead of with all the negative stuff, you start to hear what that could look like in a different way. And to your point, it's like a diet, right? And I'm going to have a healthy diet, or I'm going to have this diet that makes me physically and mentally and emotionally ill. So go to our website, dignityindex.us, and there's a pledge that we invite people to take, which is a super simple pledge. It just basically says, I pledge to do more to treat people with dignity than contempt. And the pledge is designed. The first couple of lines are designed for Americans, but you can replace that with anyone. But because we believe that we can't have a healthy democracy without healthy debate, and we believe that we can't have healthy debate without dignity. So take the pledge, and then we have a newsletter that we send out every couple of weeks. And if you take the pledge, you'll get our newsletter, and you'll see we talk about some of these tools and strategies, and you join this community of other people that are trying to change the trajectory, change the direction that we're going in, as a country, as a world, and in our families and workplaces.
If you had a wish for our listeners today, Tami, what would that be?
I think my wish would be that we'd step back for just a minute, take a deep breath, and decide to look at things differently and say, I know there's a problem. I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. And the end part of that wish is to go visit my website.
Well, I would agree in terms of exploring a bit more about what the Dignity Index is, learning to have better conversations, and not expecting someone else to do the work. I have to start with me, because
Right.
when I come to the conversation differently, the reactions are going to be different. And I can't change the world if I don't change myself first.
Yeah. And my wish would be that we do take stock in what we're putting in what we're looking at, what we're listening to. Does it make me angry? Does it make me happy? Does it make me mad? And really changing our diet. That would be my wish.
Thanks for listening. You'll find me, Alli, on Instagram at Alli Kerr Fitness.
And you'll find me, Shawna, on Instagram at Shawna Kaminski. Feel free to pop us a DM with questions and or feedback. If you're enjoying the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, please subscribe and share it with other health-minded women. Ratings and reviews are also much appreciated and help us get our message out to a larger audience.
Until next time, be healthy and be happy.